Productivity feels like a word that we all just throw around here and there, and there are so many videos, articles, frameworks, books on this topic. I think I often get questioned on how I'm so productive all the time, which isn't really true, but I never know how quite to put it into words. Some might credit frameworks or hacks like the 2-minute rule, or just dismiss productivity completely and turn to motivation or the hustle mindset. I usually respond with a very simple practice of writing lists. So I break down what I need to do in the day with a simple list, and essentially you want to keep breaking down those action points until you get something that's easy to do. Ali Abdaal has been in the world of productivity long before I even knew what it meant, and he's the most widely known productivity expert or guru around on YouTube. So it's no surprise that his curiosity for productivity methods and background in medicine has led him to write this book, Feel Good Productivity, which I pre-ordered back in the summer and read in under a week, which is crazy. So just for some context, I don't actually read that many books. You might have seen my bookshelf here. It's very limited because, I used to read a lot of fiction when I was younger, and that has kind of like dissipated as my creative outlets have turned towards other things. But when a creator that you admire who has been creating content for a very long time comes out with a book, then it's kind of a no-brainer to order it and read it. A memorable quote from Ali that has stuck with me throughout the years is the idea of journey before destination, which I think he took from a fantasy book, but it's also something that my architecture tutors during my masters always said to me, and it's something that has just made sense. So in this video, I'm going to share 3 lessons that I think architecture students can take away from this book, and just generally about productivity as a whole, because the stereotype is that for a worrying number of years that architecture students are people who go on to become architects and have a terrible work-life balance because of their experiences at university. They're doing an incredibly difficult course for a long number of years, only to, have to cope through multiple deadlines and projects and tutors breathing down their necks. However, I kind of call bullshit because I think we've been limited to this type of narrative when I've known plenty of successful designers find their passion in branches of architecture or even in architecture themselves, and they didn't really rely on all-nighters or this like backward mold of what an architecture student should have to do to survive in architecture school. I have to mention that I wasn't quite expecting the balance of anecdotal and actionable advice to then be paired with scientific experiments and studies in this book, but I totally understand why it's there, and it kind of strengthens the frameworks and the reasonings behind why Ali gives some of his advice in the book. So the book is separated into 3 chapters called Energize, Unblock, and Sustain. And each one of those chapters has sub-chapters and kind of like bite-sized lessons in between. I also really love the fact that this book isn't just a one-time read. You can go back to it and refer to different lessons as and when you need. So it makes this book a really powerful resource, and it almost feels as if Ali has basically taken all of his YouTube content, written content online, extracted and distilled some of those lessons and teachings from his content into this book, which is great. So even if you're unfamiliar with his work, I would definitely recommend it for a beginner who's trying to be more productive and doesn't want to kind of go down the very hard and difficult route, because I think eventually that will lead to burnout, and understanding the good benefits behind productivity and the good reasonings why you should view it as something that needs to be healthy is the best way to start. So on page 64, Ali mentions a beginner mindset, and this is basically explained through the concept of Shoshin, which is a Zen practice, and it refers to a state of mind in which we approach every task and situation with the curiosity, openness, and humility of a beginner. Ali then goes on to explain how our hobbies and skills are a series of set methods that we've learned, which kind of define our future decisions. So a beginner, however, is more willing to try different things and experiment without kind of worrying about the result, because they're embracing innovation and experimentation. Now, you might be thinking, this isn't really the productivity angle I was looking for. However, this is really vital in understanding the role that power plays in our day-to-day lives. In particular, the feeling of empowerment rather than the feeling of having power over someone else. When you first start out in architecture school, you're a beginner. Maybe you don't have a background knowledge in architecture, or you don't really know much about famous architects or buildings or how to do a drawing. I was in that position. But as long as you have some kind of curiosity or skill set that you want to improve and learn, and that kind of like matches what architects do essentially, I think that's incredibly valuable. In my first year of architecture school, almost half of my course mates dropped out before the year ended, which was a real shock, but it's something that we were told to expect. And it's a reality that does happen across the world, I suppose. And it is kind of down to the fact that the degree is demanding and somewhat elusive to the point where you don't really know if it is for you until you give it a go. But having the willingness to learn and explore and experiment with different approaches without falling into this rabbit hole of whether or not it will work or catastrophizing, like the end outcome is how you can end up being productive very early on. And these kind of like habits will serve you for a long time. So if you approach your next task with that of a beginner's mindset and go back to the basics, or even like just cut yourself some slack, you can then begin to enjoy the learning process and embrace the failures along the way. I quite like this idea of being curious and to some extent even questioning things. Why can't I make a model that is based on a city and a carpet and is basically as tall as me? I've mentioned how the trajectory of a design project often involves a golden nugget or a catalyst that kind of catapults you to the edge of your skills and really pushes you in a challenging but really good way. And this is often a really huge turning point for some people that kind of like distinguishes your project from being good and from being great. So a beginner's mindset can be just the thing to unlocking that golden nugget. The next thing Ali talks about are implementation intentions, which are basically little triggers that build moments for your new behavior in your daily routine. So basically, if you decide beforehand that you're going to do something, you're much more likely to do it. And that makes sense. It's kind of like a very obvious concept, but it goes very deep. And he follows this up with a chapter on time blocking, therein which lies your answer on how to kind of go about doing these implementation intentions. So I've skipped past the why and what of identifying tasks and end goals because I think to a degree, the when of when you're doing stuff is a lot more important, especially for architecture students who find it very difficult to manage their time well. Now, I'm a natural night owl and I can't usually focus in the mornings or mid-afternoons, and my energy spikes incredibly in the evenings, even now, so when I'm not even an architecture student, but that's just how I am. So I've accepted that fact and actually used it to my advantage. So knowing when you're most likely to have that energy spike will play to your advantage and will kind of give you this hint on when you should be doing certain activities. So for example, architecture students are faced with a weekly deadline, the dreaded tutorials. So this means that you're working on a single project for a number of weeks, and each week your workload seems to increase. But every week you also get this sense of the fact that you're starting from scratch, or that you haven't really done much and you're not progressing because you spend the majority of the week just procrastinating until the night before. And I totally understand that kind of feeling, and it does happen and it's not great. It's almost a mix of a creative block and just not being organized enough to have that level of detail of knowing when you're going to do something. And of course, I understand that life gets in the way and you should definitely expect the unexpected and give yourself that breathing room to, I guess, just account for things that might happen. But as Ali mentions, on one level, asking when is also about accepting your limitations. This leads to the difference between cramming your calendar with as many tasks as possible, not giving yourself enough breathing room in between, and kind of having a very strict and rigid calendar to kind of go by, which often results in like you not even following it at all. Or you can prioritize certain tasks and then implement them into your calendar, working around your current routine. The study that Ali mentions for implementation intentions involves a group that receives prompts via email to go and work out versus one that doesn't, and you can totally imagine which one was more likely to do those workouts. And you can do this in a very simple way as well. It's just about having those small reminders. And so I have a reoccurring reminder every single morning to go to the gym at 8:30 a.m. and I already have mentally set the intention the night before by either getting out my gym clothes or kind of setting my alarm. But just having that extra reminder on my phone becomes something that I then get to tick off my to-do list. So it almost acts like as a catalyst for me then being like, okay, well, that's one thing off my to-do list today. And it gives you that satisfaction almost. Now, incorporating these triggers, however small it can be, whether it's to drink water or to sketch for an hour or even indulge in an unrelated hobby, can really be the difference in gaining back that control in your time. And time is really valuable, especially for students. And if implemented correctly and early on, it can actually make the biggest difference to your productivity routine in the long term. Now, the last lesson that I wanted to talk to you about is mindlessly recharging. And I know, again, it doesn't really sound like a very traditional productivity concept, but it actually might be the most important one. When you avoid rest, you invite burnout. It's just as simple as that. I think it's so easy to see your friends or peers in the studio working till late and just be like, yeah, why can't I also do the same? But actually you realize that not all of us are the same, and not all of us work in the same way either. And so you're avoiding sleep, or you're kind of like being there because you want to avoid that FOMO. And the reality is that the next day you'll come back to uni and you'll realize that you've barely progressed, and worse, your sleep is just out of whack, which is not really a win-win, is it? I am a huge advocate for getting sleep, and I really believe that you don't have to sacrifice your sleep if you want to study architecture and pursue this kind of career path. So mindless recharging is a form of rest that's best taken in small doses, and I need you to remember this point because there's a very thin line between mindlessly recharging and procrastinating. So Ali defines mindless recharging as any activity that you're doing when you're not thinking too hard about relaxing. A popular example of this is how people say the best ideas come to them in the shower when they're doing something completely unrelated, but it's almost like a subconscious thing where your mind is still working. And it's an activity also where you're not just lazing around and doing nothing, but you're kind of like relaxed to a certain level and you're still actively doing something else. So basically he's trying to say that doing nothing can still be surprisingly productive. I guess it's because we tend to view mindless activities as useless or a waste of time or being unproductive. And there is this unspoken hustle culture, not just in architecture, but it's become something that we're so used to. So using our previous principle, you can try to time block this activity and schedule in when you just want to do mindless stuff, whether it's a hobby. But the reality is that every day won't be the same. So this is when it becomes incredibly important to listen to your body. You know, if you're sick and you're trying to do mindless stuff, you're also trying to have a 9-to-5 job and do so many other things, you simply will burn yourself out because you don't have that energy. Another way to frame it is if you're thinking about, you know, when you're looking back on your time as an architecture student, do you really want to cherish the moments when you stayed up through the middle of the night doing this render while you were sick and forcing yourself to kind of like push through, only for it to not mean much when you actually go to submit your work at the end of the year? I also think about how I would give advice to a first year student now that I've completed my architectural education, because you'd be surprised as to how many architects I've spoken to who all say it's not worth doing all-nighters and sacrificing your personal life for this type of career. So Ali explains this as the write-off principle, and this is the idea that we should grant ourselves permission for a write-off day and intentionally step away from achieving anything. Now, remember how I said small doses? So this type of rest can quickly turn into procrastination, which then in turn leads to panic because you're like, oh, well, you know, I was giving myself a couple of days to rest, and then you're immediately faced with the fact that tomorrow morning you've got this 10 a.m. deadline and you haven't really done as much work as you thought you would. So, you know, you have to be really mindful of when you're taking that rest too, equally listening to your body. So like I said, it's a very difficult thing to do. So instead, I think you could give yourself this get out of jail free card, maybe like once a week or once a month, because that way it can kind of help you to shift your energy and reset in a way, and therefore you're not beating yourself up about being unproductive. Now, I've only read this book once, so I'm yet to go through my rereads. I've been adding notes here and there as well, but I can begin to see these little shifts in mindset before I start a new task or I say yes to another project. And I think for me, feel good productivity is about crafting a sustainable version of what productivity means to you. It definitely shouldn't be defined what everyone else assumes about productivity, because then you're kind of getting sucked into this hustle mindset and all of that kind of toxic behavior. There's really no singular solution, and I don't think that we should be framing productivity as a toxic habit that's purposely difficult or unachievable, and everyone can be productive in their own ways. So I would definitely recommend this book to people who are just starting out in the world of self-development. I have found a lot of similarities between the book and Ali's existing content on YouTube. So if you're unsure whether you should get this book or not, then definitely try and watch some of his videos first. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have read the book in the comments below and what you thought of it.